her location of a people that came to call themselves, and quite frankly, even in Helium-Gileomese, or is it Heliomese terms, a sort of confiscated identity, the Afrikaners. Because the first people that we called Afrikaners were native slaves and colors. But at some point in the 1700s, to distinguish themselves from Uitlanders, from other white Europeans, and to try basically to designate an identity that they are white natives of the African continent. So Hannah Arendt does something very interesting, which I don't think we interact with a lot, which I think explains the brand of racism that found expression in South Africa. It's a very unique brand because what she does there is to demonstrate that for about a century or so, these descendants of Hollanders or the Dutch degenerated, so degenerated culturally, spiritually, that they became indistinguishable to the other Bantu people in the South. But the only difference was the color of their skin.
That's her argument.
And this is very important in the identity of the Afrikaners. That within Western civilization, there were actually a degeneration. They were so lost in terms of Western civilization, Western sentiment, Western mannerisms. She actually says very dramatic things about them. And I think all of us should revisit that chapter. That these people were literally an embarrassment to people who colonize countries. They had achieved nothing. They were busy with nothing. And their organization of themselves was based on contempt to work.
That's what she says, yeah.
They had no literature. They had no science. They had no inventions. The things that were central to the identification of Europeans in other parts of the world in the great march of a civilizing mission. But they were also so useless to Europe itself. They were cut off. And until she argues, and this is important, I think, just to conclude that part, apartheid is therefore the coming in together of this racial identity, which was like basically the superiority, their superiority was based on nothing, was not based on a civilization. Their claim to superiority was basically that they looked white. And including the great trek, they kept running away, trekking as it were, from any settlement, of developing a place, developing a landscape, turning it, subjecting it, as it were, to the different projects of human mastery. They were not the master race. Hence their distortion of Christianity. Although the Christian premise itself betrayed the fact that they could be a chosen people, and it didn't help when the Jewish community increased, particularly around the industrial projects of Kimberley and the Witwatersrand. And their contempt as well for the Jews was the basic disorganization of them as a chosen people. Now, so basically, Afrikaner identity is an identity of this, in brackets, white trash, that the entire Western civilization couldn't really relate with. Africa, apartheid, is therefore a technology of civilizing, of uplifting them culturally to the levels of Western identity after having been abandoned. Now that's not original to me, that's Hannah Arendt. And she locates this because she says that that brand of racism is actually, as a tool of imperialist rule, originates in South Africa. And the second tool that was important to imperialist domination was bureaucracy. And apartheid, was a powerful. So at the core of apartheid, it's not quite the native question where the native is African natives. It's actually the native question in as far as saving what had become native out of Afrikaners. So it was a technology, as it were, a bureaucratic technology to which secret societies were at the center, not just the secret societies that were central to the expansionist project of Cecil John Rhodes, but also themselves, Afrikaners, ran apartheid through a bureaucratic secret community. And their relationship to capitalist production, it betrayed that logic. Apartheid was not always a rational project to capitalist profit extraction. Now, that's in a sense, apartheid is always, in my view, in that sense, it is not something that is married to a place called South Africa, neither is something that a democratic system can truly subdue. To the extent to which a white identity anywhere in the world is bastardized, it will require the racial ideological tools and bureaucratic technologies to distinguish that white society in the name of a global master race. Of course, I think that because I'm with Professor Mbembe, I suspect that there are certain provocations I can make. He's an elder. And there's something otherwise curious, because this is a minority, they remain a minority. But somehow they've managed to survive for 400 years with the insistence of that they are different because they are white. Nothing else, no other claim. There's no, even when Afrikaner nationalism becomes a project in the 1920s, it's not really a claim to some past civilization. It's not really a claim to some past literary movement or, the cultural, like sort of the British would do, the Greeks would do, and so on and so forth, because it is a stolen identity. It's a stolen identity. They are not Africans because they've got in their eyes, the Bantus are not quite human. So, and this is where I think I want to sort of push the idea a little bit. The curious, or rather the tragic part is apartheid as well, is for a white settler community. That's why it doesn't really arise in other parts of the continent. It's about these people who think they have nowhere else to go. Otherwise, after the abandonment of the trade stations or after the abandonment of a plantation, white people normally just went back to Europe. So there's this problem here of the native question of a people that had become sort of niggerized. But these people existed within a large native black population. And it is here that I think the curious or tragic question of tonight must also travel. And Fanon puts it in much more radical terms. Fanon says, don't tell me about black people or the black man. He has bought to the superiority of the white man a long time ago. Exactly on what grounds did Afrikaner people in that 120, 150 years, precisely on what grounds did they manage to exist as a superior people? Precisely on what grounds today do we still make an apology towards radical equality? Precisely on what grounds? And that's my question. What about black people that constantly makes you, or makes us, buy into whites as gods? That's some lightness, before the missionaries, before Christianity, just that these people look white, Nkosi yami. We enter into different forms of subservience. We fight because they're taking something. Otherwise, there is this buying into the fact that somehow they are above. And it robs the world. It robs the world. It robs black people in general of radical equality. I'm interested in that question. My final one.